We are, what, I guess a month into spring, and it feels more like, I don't know, Chaucer had it right with April is the cruelest month. Tales and all of that soca the rota stuff. So, yeah.
It's quite a stark reminder as well, Gary, seeing you guys in masks. I mean, we've been out of that situation for a long time now. We are almost 90 days without a community transmission. So I feel for all you guys in the States having to still experience that situation.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We do have the opposite problem now before. It's just August. Oh, okay. John's gonna turn this down. Can you speak more softly? No.
That's not a skill that is given to us people.
Okay, keep you. That's your cue. Speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Seems. Say a little more, Stephen.
Am I still super loud?
We're okay. You guys can hear okay? It's not too much. Okay, we're fine. All right. So we'll see. Hopefully Chuck can join us here. So one thing I can do, it's entirely up to you and it's up to everybody here. Was thinking that I would say a few introductory remarks about positive work, the positive work movement. There's not nearly as much to say about it as there is the field of the movement of positive education. But there are a few things I can say about positive work, especially pertaining to flow. And then, so I can go through some slides here pretty quickly on that. But I think the class is much more interested in hearing what you have to say. I told them a little bit in an email about just a couple basics about sort of your professional journey. And if you could just take us through that narrative, that would be terrific. And then we'll open it up for questions and we'll see where it goes. Does that sound all right?
Whatever works for whoever's in the room. How many people are there, Gary? Who am I talking to?
So we have 34 enrolled in the class. I would say today we probably have about 28 here with us. Okay. This is a course called Foundations of Positive Psychology at the University of Northern Iowa. And these are all undergraduates, unlike the class that you and Chuck spoke with in the fall, which was an MBA class. Yeah. All undergraduates, a range of majors. A number of them are psychology majors, but certainly probably not even the majority, but quite a few are. I think for everybody here, first exposure to the field of positive psychology. And I think for almost everybody here, their first exposure to flow. A few people have heard of it, but I don't think knew a lot about it coming into the class. So,
okay. Cool.
So I have no idea where, really beyond what little I asked for, where Stephen is going to take us. So we'll enjoy the surprise together.
Neither do I. It's an exploration for me too.
Okay. All right. So we're recording, and I'll go through some slides here, and then we'll introduce you, and you can talk to us. We'll talk to you. I do want to share the screen. So John, can you come up here and help us with that? Good. All right. Thank you. How's that? All right. So you can hear Stephen?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So we've spent early in the class, early on in the semester, we started talking about positive emotions and positive experiences. And more recently, the last few weeks, moving into positive institutions. And we spent some time talking about the positive education movement, positive psychology applied to schools, and had some great guests with us. I guess it was just last week. So I want to spend a little time talking about positive work. So the principles of positive psychology over the last 20 years have been applied, but not nearly with the kind of aggressive application as you've seen in the schools have been applied to the workplace. And there are good reasons that probably won't surprise us for the resistance of the workplace to principles of positive psychology. In fact, I think, Stephen, you and I spoke about this several weeks ago, I think, didn't we, on a Zoom call? And part of it is, you know, the workplace, when things are going fine and businesses are making money and stockholders are making, you know, their money every quarter, and the stakeholders in the business are doing well, and it's not broken. Business doesn't feel a need to go out on a limb and be desperate or act upon desperation, because there is no desperation to try to fix things. So there hasn't been the kind of embrace of, I think that's part of what's going on. There hasn't been the kind of embrace of the principles of positive psychology within business, as has been the case certainly within education. So, but nonetheless, there have been some good inroads made. One is in the area of strengths. I'm not going to talk about strengths today, but in the group here, they've all completed Seligman's VIA, the values and action inventory, and we've looked at strengths, character strengths from that perspective. Within the business world, the Gallup organization, along with what's his name? Gallup and the Strengths Finder. Strengths Finder, somebody help me, I can't think of it right now. I don't have any of this written down. Clifton, the Clifton Strengths Finder. Don Clifton was a professor at the University of Nebraska, and several decades ago was very serious about developing an inventory for assessing people's strengths. And many people here, I'm sure in the class, have taken the Clifton Strengths Finder, and that's been applied a lot within business. It's quite different from the VIA that everybody in the class has done, but that has had a big impact within business. And way back a few decades ago, Don Clifton said it was his goal, his dream, that someday 1 million people will have taken the Strengths Finder and will know their strengths. And I think the number is now up to something like 35 million. So far exceeded what you know, his best wish, his biggest hopes. But one of the areas in which there has been some pretty good application of principles of positive psychology is in flow. So we've talked about flow quite a lot here in this course. There are just a few things I want to talk about, and Stephen, I'm sure you'll have plenty of good stuff to add to this as well. But I have a slide here to show the results of a recent survey by the Gallup organization. And every year it's pretty much the same, that only 13% of employees, this was a couple of years ago, worldwide, say that they are engaged in their jobs. That's pretty sad. You know, most of you guys, you're looking forward to a career, you want to get into your work, get into your field and make great things happen and see yourself being hopefully very engaged in what you're doing and have very rewarding kind of work, and it really being something that's very fulfilling for you and for others. And I hope that's the case. But a lot of people, the vast majority, as you can see by this, and every year this figure is pretty much, you know, replicated year after year, people are not engaged in their jobs, and it's a sad thing. And also we've got a lot of work showing that the workplace, for lots of reasons, is really killing people. Not just emotionally, their souls are crushed by work, they're emotionally crushed by work, physically because of ergonomic issues and all kinds of other stuff, and job design, they're crushed by work. So there are a lot of things that are happening in the work world that are way off base. Things are seriously amiss, and a lot of good things can happen because of positive psychology. And there's been some progress. So flow is one of the areas. We've talked about this in the class, so I'm not going to go over this in any kind of detail at all. Everybody knows this. We've talked about this, things that happen during flow, and then the necessary conditions for flow. But way back, many of you, I'm sure, know the publication Fast Company. They did a feature story called The Art of Work, and I'll just read you their little blurb here at the top, kind of their little teaser for this article. This was shortly after the book Flow was published. What would happen if the best moments in your life happened at the office? And most people have been working a while would hear that and think, yeah, tell me about it. I don't see that ever happening. That would be flow. And thanks to a guy with an unpronounceable name, more and more businesses want to know more about it. And this was is a terrific article about how flow can be applied, in the workplace. And Stephen will probably want to talk a little bit about this. Our friend Zsadin Veche in Hungary, in Budapest, he and Mihai collaborated and developed this interactive computer game called Fligby, which is an acronym for Flow is Good Business for You, which is a computer simulation where you're playing not against anybody else, but you're really playing against yourself. And you're playing this game and you're working your way through these scenes. And you, as the person playing the game, are the general manager of a California winery. And you've just been hired into this role. The previous general manager has left, and he has left the place in total disarray with all kinds of pathology, all kinds of problems. And it's your job as the general manager of this winery to do three things as you're playing this game. And it takes several hours to play the game as you're working your way through the game, as you're interacting with this cast of characters that you're suddenly have been foisted upon you. You're trying to make a profit, which is what businesses try to do. You're trying to, as much as possible, increase and maintain sustainability for the organization, and also trying as much as possible to get people and keep people in a state of flow. And it's a very compelling game. It's an award-winning, international award-winning game. And some great things are happening, I think, because of Fligby. So that's one example. A number of years ago, Mike wrote a book called Good Business, and which is based upon interviews of some of the top leaders, in business around the world at the time. And urge you, if you're interested at all in the application of flow and positive psychology in business, take a look at the book Good Business. There we go. Some organizations that have, and I'm not going to go into much detail here because we don't have a lot of time, that have applied principles of flow to really, in some cases, at an extreme level, to redefine how they do work. One is LG. Everybody knows that logo, LG, and you go into stores that sell products that have screens or computers, you see LG. What is the primary business? I don't know if it still is, but it was for decades. The primary business of the South Korean business LG. What did they do? What do they? I think it's still their mainline business. We see their name, their logo on screens all the time. But what kind of a company are they? What's the nature of their work they deal with? Anybody know? Stephen, do you know?
No.
Yep, they're a chemicals company. What? So I don't know how they moved into what they're so famous for now, but chemicals, that's their business. Yvon Chouinard, some of you probably know Chouinard's book, Let My People Go Surfing. There's a more recent edition now. He's the founder of the company Patagonia. You see Patagonia's clothing all over the place, their logo all over the place. And the subtitle of this is The Education of a Reluctant Businessman. Because Chouinard was someone he is an outdoorsman, he was a rock climber, a mountaineer, and he was very concerned, this goes way back into the 60s, about the damage that was being done to the environment through rock climbing and through mountaineering, that the faces of rocks were deteriorating because of the materials that people were using when they were engaging in rock climbing outside. So that's how he started Patagonia, to try to fix that problem and come up with gear that would preserve the face of the rock rather than destroying it, so there would still be rock to climb. And then since then, lots of great things have come about because of Patagonia. But his subtitle there, Stephen, I thought about you a couple days ago when I thought about his subtitle, The Education of a Reluctant Businessman. I might be wrong, but based upon our conversation, I think your story is more like the education of an enthusiastic businessman, at least early on, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to miscast where you are, so you can tell us about that. Another company, there's a Scandinavian company called Green Cargo. They massively changed how they design work, how they design jobs, how they meet the needs for employee satisfaction by applying principles of flow to give people meaningful work. There's an organization that many of you are probably familiar with called the Honor Foundation, which is an organization that helps train and place veterans, U.S. veterans, within mainstream culture, within the work culture after they're finished with their service. And one of the big problems they found, as it says there in that little quote, the biggest obstacle to veterans' integration into the workplace is potentially poor fit within the company culture, and have found that using flow, teaching people about flow, helping companies design environments for flow, much of that can be addressed. Google is a company. I know you can't read, well, maybe you can read part of what's up there. But if you read the book, How Google Works by Eric Schmidt, the first author anyway, much of the success of Google, at least among the creatives within Google, Schmidt attributes to the concept of flow and finding ways of explicitly applying principles of flow to job design, to workflow, different use of the term flow, but to try to make good things happen and to harness people's creativity because of the power of flow. Those of you, any of you who are the IO majors, industrial organizational psychology? I know we have one, two, a couple of them anyway, a couple IO majors. You may have in your my heading here at the top is building flow-wise environments. How can we do that? One way is that we've looked at some examples. One is by what I call return to the classics. So those of you who are industrial organizational majors, you're probably familiar with Herzberg's theory, his two-factor model. It's been around for a very long time. Frederick Herzberg was a professor at Case Western University in the US. And wrote this book, or not this book, this article that was for many, many years, the most reprinted article in the Harvard Business Review, and that's really saying something. And the title of the article is, this goes way back to the late 60s, One More Time. The implication is, how many times do we have to go through this? But let's do it one more. One more time. How do you motivate employees? And his answer to that, he has this very long and tongue-in-cheek, in some cases pretty jaded kind of a perspective where he shares his research and his theory. But the answer to it, he says, if you want someone to do a good job, give him or her a good job to do. If we give people jobs to do that aren't well-designed jobs, that aren't jobs that give people opportunity to be autonomous, to have control over a large piece of work, to really be involved in something meaningful, to really contribute to the larger purpose, but rather, putting them in as cogs within a machine and then wondering why, their social needs, their emotional needs, their intellectual needs, their cultural needs even are not being met, because the workplace is, because of how jobs are designed, is doing so much to conspire against them. So here we are, what, 40, 50 years after Herzberg, I guess 50 years now, wrote this article. And we're still in the same dilemma that workplaces, organizations, by and large, some exceptions, are still so recalcitrant to the kind of change that's necessary to really do the kind of stuff that, Herzberg was talking about. And there's lots of good research to support that it's important. The only kind of motivation that's out there is not just extrinsic motivation, but designing jobs so that people be intrinsically motivated. A couple other things here. How many have heard of job crafting? You guys, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to talk about it. I'm just looking for a show of hands here. How many have heard the term job crafting? It's not a new term by any means. Anybody has heard the term job crafting? Okay, I'm seeing Stephen, I'm seeing no hands whatsoever, and that doesn't surprise me in the least. Even though this is a concept that's been around for 20 years probably, and has been maybe a little bit more, and has been applied quite aggressively within some organizations, most places aren't doing it. Most people aren't aware of it. Most HR departments aren't aware of it. But the idea is to actually involve the person rather than giving him or her a job description. Say, here's your job description, do it. And you're not having any input in what your job description is, but on a regular basis, working with a coach, and most people I think would rather have a coach rather than a boss or a supervisor to report to, periodically reviewing the job, establishing clear goals, how to craft the job for the person around the principles of flow. At least that's how I framed it here, to give them more meaningful work to do. But unfortunately, we don't see it very often. I think I asked you guys in the class if any of you knew about Agile a couple of weeks ago. If I didn't, I'll ask it now. Does the term Agile mean anything to anyone? Kanban or Kanban, depending upon how you want to pronounce it. Okay, so nobody here, but a lot of organizations are doing this, especially in web development work, software design, development work, using a program or an approach called agile teams, running scrums, which is a term from soccer or football, as they say in other parts of the world. We won't go into that right now, but because we just don't have time, but it's one way. And Stephen, if you want to address that, you certainly can. One way of helping to give people opportunities to experience flow within the workplace. Google does something, capitalizing on the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. What they do is that they have people, their engineers, at least in theory, this is what they do. Their engineers are permitted 20% of their week, 20% of their time to work on side projects, something that they're really passionate about, something that they personally are very interested in, that ties in with, what Google does, but it's not something that they're directed to do by the organization, but they're entitled to do that or permitted to do that during 20% of their time on these side projects. We know the people out at Claremont Graduate University, where Mike is, they developed an ESM software system for delivering prompts on the telephone for your phone for doing ESM surveys. And that was developed on a side project out of Google. But many of the people at Google I've read have said, no, it's not really 80-20. It's more like 100%, 20%. That if you're going to do a side project, it's 20% above and beyond what you're actually doing, your 100% job. So. And the last thing I'm going to mention here is, which I alluded to briefly earlier, is this game Fligby, using gamification to teach people how to, leadership role. And if any of you guys here want to play Fligby, just let me know and I can get you a code from Zad, and you can play the game and try it out. But it's a way where you as the manager do your best, among other things, to try to get these people. And look at Rebecca there. She's one of the characters that you have to work with. And her expression is perfect. It represents perfectly her attitude, because she is a tough person to have to lead. And you can see it right there. So your job as you're playing the game is to, as much as possible, get people in flow. And then you've got the character strengths there, or the leadership strengths, I should say, that you are trying to build in your, this reflects your leadership strengths, I guess, as the person playing the game, based upon the decisions that you make while playing the game. So, some good things happening. Stephen, you come up here, John. Just hit stop share. All right, there we go. So there are some good things happening, certainly in the application flow, and you know a lot more. John, can you come up here? I don't think people want to see my desktop. I'm laughing with you. It's okay. There you go.
That should be all of it, right?
I think so. So there are some things happening, probably more in pockets here and there, with applying principles of positive psychology and with flow as well. I've got a probably more jaded perspective on some of the stuff than maybe I should. I don't know. But we're going to turn to Stephen here. So Stephen, can you tell us who you are and where you're from and anything you want to share with us? And I'm going to turn to you guys. The three TAs here have a wireless mic, and they're going to come around and ask you for your questions for Stephen. And if no one raises his or her hand, I will designate people to ask questions. So we'll see how this goes. All right. And hopefully
Gary,
soon.
Can you spin your laptop round so I can see the room? It's quite difficult to present to
Sure, sure.
person when there's
You know, it's
20 some others in there.
Come on. Okay, let's see what this works.
As nice as it is to look at you, I'd rather look at
No, yeah, yeah. I can do this without disconnecting some cables.
Oh yeah, that might be a problem. Oh, and I'm up here, okay.
That's the challenge. And we're not going to be able to get a sight line that's going to give you everybody. I know that.
That's okay. Ah, beautiful. Okay, much better.
This is
Hi,
beautiful.
everyone.
Is that?
That
Okay.
is
All right.
fabulous.
Okay.
That's fabulous.
All right.
So you want me just to freestyle, Gary?
I'm sorry, Stephen.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
just fine. Yep.
Super.
All right.
So my name's Stephen. I'm Scottish, but I'm fortunately down in Sydney, Australia. I've been down here for 11 years, which has been an amazing experience for 11 years, but very fortunate in the last year in the way in which we've handled COVID. We're effectively COVID free at the moment, which is a lovely place to be. And I sympathise and empathise with all you guys who are having to suffer through mask wearing and all the other challenges that we're facing at the moment. So just stay strong with that, and I'm sure everyone will get out of it eventually. So Gary asked if I'd come along and talk about my career and what I'm doing at the moment. So I'll maybe go back and say, for the 16 years of my career, a lot of the decisions that I made and where I ended up were largely not decisions that I made entirely of my own volition. You know, I made a lot of choices because of what society expected of me or what other people said might be good for me. So for example, when I went to university, when I was in your guys' shoes, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And it was my mum who said, well, just go and do something with computers. There's always going to be jobs with computers. And all of a sudden I'm doing a computer science undergraduate course. And ultimately that led me into a career in technology. And in the last 10 years of that, I've been pursuing larger, or up until 2 years ago for 10 years, pursuing larger and more senior roles, larger and more senior salary, because I thought that was what was important to me. And I thought that's what was going to make me happy. And the reality was that slowly I began to discover that actually very, very little about those extrinsic motivators, when achieved on their own, actually provides a significant level of fulfillment personally and in our broader lives. And across that 10 years, I've been very fortunate to work with some huge organizations. So I was an executive at Oracle, I was an executive at Adobe. And in those environments, that focus upon extrinsic motivation is amplified significantly. You know, a lot of the direction of those organizations and the way in which they operate is governed by return to stakeholder or to return to investors. So a lot of the narrative and a lot of how the business is thought about and how each individual task that you do in any given day is measured relative to how it's going to improve the stock price or how it's going to not be detrimental to the stock price. And then in the last maybe 7 or 8 years, there was this huge change in focus towards customer centricity and the need for us to make sure that everything we did was doing the right thing for the customer. And the compounding effect that I observed between those two dynamics, a huge focus on investors and the street, and a huge focus on the customers we're trying to serve, was this emergent situation where myself and many of the other employees around me were thinking, well, who is actually looking out for me? You know, we are the ones here with our kind of shoulder to the grindstone, like grinding away like a lot, day after day, long hours. But a lot of the narrative we hear that's used to motivate us is about kind of parties other than ourselves, the investors and the customers that we're trying to serve. And that's not to say that these people aren't important, but very little consideration was given to the enjoyment, or even just the kind of health, mental health and sanity of the employees in the businesses that we worked in. And that's only getting worse now. You know, as technology increases and improves at a rapid rate of knots, the competition in the corporate marketplace is ever increasing, and it's generating this situation, or these VUCA conditions that you may or may not have heard of, where businesses are subject to volatility, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Now, all of these things are serving to make people who are working incredibly hard, driven by, for the most part, these extrinsic motivators or cash or indeed fear. These conditions, these VUCA conditions, are making things a lot worse. And we're seeing this huge epidemic of mental health, you know, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety in the workplace, and very little being done comparatively by organizations or corporate bodies to try and support individuals as they kind of experience that situation. And that was certainly true of me. Towards the end of that journey with Oracle and Adobe, I could kind of observe myself becoming more and more stressed and effectively on the verge of depression and a nervous breakdown. I was fortunate enough to be able to get some perspective and recognize that something wasn't quite right in what was going on. And I decided to step away. But in the kind of in the intervening time between that decision to step away from the corporate world and kind of beginning to observe those things in myself, I was introduced to the concept of flow and a lot of the positive psychology that sits beneath that through a book called Stealing Fire. Now, Stealing Fire probably is not the most academically rigorous book around flow that you'll find, but as a gateway to the science, as a gateway to the theory, as a gateway to the benefits of flow, it was a lifesaver for me, because it allowed me to see that it's not only extrinsic motivation that can be the basis, the foundation for a good life. You know, materialism, consumerism, the need to keep up with the Joneses or have as good a car as your friend down the street does, or be able to go on the same exotic holiday that someone else might. While those things are nice, they're not going to provide a sustainable level of motivation. Hey, Chuck, how are you?
Hey, Chuck.
Well,
thank you, Chuck.
So that book set me off on a journey of trying to work out, well, what would it mean for me to build a life where I was authentically happy, where I wasn't faking happiness through all of these extrinsic things I was seeking, but what would it take to actually make me happy? And flow, and actually the way in which flow makes you feel in the work environment, as Gary alluded to, it was a big part of that. I might talk a little bit about the work that I do now, and then reflect upon how I think that would have solved a lot of the problems that I experienced as I was going through my career, and then maybe a little bit about how to think about that as you embark upon building a career post-academia. So I'm currently building a business called Autotelic, and Autotelic is one of the primary philosophies that underpins flow, and the word Autotelic means to do something just for the sake of doing it. Effectively, it's another word for intrinsic motivation. And what I'm interested in my business is human potential and what can be achieved by individuals when they are motivated by intrinsic motivation, in addition to extrinsic motivation. I'm not naive enough, nor am I professing that we need to shift everyone away from wanting to earn a living or to having nice things. I think that is important, but we need to find an adequate balance between extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. And the experience of flow, or what flow feels like when you experience it, has been proven to be an incredibly strong intrinsic motivator. And a lot of that is founded in the kind of emerging neuroscience and physiological science that underpins that state of flow. And it's been discovered, and you might have explored this already, been discovered to be one of the most potent and pleasure-inducing experiences that the human body or we as humans can experience. And as such, it's incredibly addictive. And the work that I do is to, number one, bring awareness to flow as part of positive psychology. But more than that, bring awareness and show people where they have already experienced flow in their life and make it easy for people to experience flow in the future, such that they can find that balance between the extrinsic motivators that are rife today and flow as an intrinsic motivator. And it's incredibly rewarding work because as I go into the corporate environment, I see many people that were in the same position as me, fighting hard to keep their head above water because they've got equity in these large tech companies that they're working in, and it's provided to them over a long vesting period, so they're kind of handcuffed to that business, trying to do their best for their customers, but really just quite miserable and not really feeling any fulfillment in the work that they're doing. And it's difficult because at the upper echelons of these organizations, at the executive level, those people too are remunerated relative to stock performance, the performance of the businesses in the stock market. And it's difficult to advise and drive change towards a different set of motivators, which in turn, especially if we're talking about introducing flow, will drive different behaviors within the business and will drive different ways of operating in the business. And Gary touched upon things like moving towards agile. These are significant and disruptive strategies to be employed in the corporate environment, and they upset the status quo for a period of time, and they jeopardize the value that is returned to stakeholders. So it's very difficult to make wholesale change in favor of building intrinsic motivation. So the work I do is specifically focused on young professionals entering the workforce who are perhaps not as wedded to the extrinsic motivators, not as wedded to the heritage that's been built up over time of the need for growth and rapid growth, and that I can start to help grow into the work that they're going to do with that balance of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation already understood. And the other group, the other cohort of professionals that I work with are individuals moving from individual contribution towards their first roles in leadership or management. And this is another huge part or huge compounding factor in the problem that I observe in the corporate marketplace of the corporate environment today, is that many of the people who are in leadership and management are there because, or are not there, I suppose, because they have the particular skills, the particular humanities that are valuable and beneficial as leaders and managers. They're there because it's all of a sudden become like the way in which we progress in our career. We've devalued the notion of mastery and specialization in favor of valuing promotion into more and more senior leadership roles, leading more and more people. And many of the people that I see in leadership roles neither want to be there, nor do they have the core innate skills that support the work that they have to do. And when you find those people in those roles, it compounds because the people beneath them then don't have good role models for what it is to lead or what it is to be led in a balanced way. And a large part of the work that I try to do is just making it transparent to prospective leaders. Like what is it to be a leader? What are your responsibilities and what's it going to feel like? And to just nod back to Gary's comments around Fligby, that's one of the primary elements of value that I think that simulation offers. It provides a risk-free opportunity for you to experience what it would be like to be a leader, to be a manager in a business. And it's quite incredible, the immersive nature of that tool allows you to experience the deeply resonant emotional response of stress and anxiety as it relates to leading people and as it relates to being responsible for the development of individuals that are in your team. And I think that's a profoundly important thing to realize about leadership and management. Our responsibilities towards the development of others and towards the growth of others. And it's kind of been lost. And it's another issue that I was subject to within my career. We think about how Maslow thought about kind of human needs and his hierarchy of needs. What's kind of emerged within the corporate environment is that the kind of needs of safety and security through providing a salary are met so that we can then go and feed ourselves, clothe ourselves and put a roof over our heads. But Maslow recognized that actually, aspirationally, humans want to grow and evolve and actualize into beings that are exploiting their kind of maximum potential, being able to kind of identify what their strengths are and then derive fulfillment through being able to express those strengths in a purposeful and meaningful way. So basically understanding what they're passionate about and being able to bring their strengths to bear for that. And in the corporate environment, there's very little recognition given to that set of that encapsulated entirety of the human condition and what humans are looking for and what we are looking for in terms of growth. Which comes back to the who's looking after me type comment that I mentioned earlier on. And it's quite sad because I believe that the corporate environment is actually the best possible incubator we can have for the development and growth of people. You know, when we're at, well, I suppose first I'll say that I believe that growth and development is directly related to our ability to expose our growing edge, the areas in which we have opportunity to grow. Is critical in order for us to be able to go on the journey of growth. And whether that's about personal transformation or personal development, or whether that's about skills development, I think the same is true. So we need a vehicle through which we can expose those growing edges. And I think the work environment is ideal for that. And certainly the amount of stress and anxiety that we're seeing amongst professionals globally is clear evidence that people's growing edges are being exposed. But where I think the businesses that we work for are falling down is that they are not helping us hold those growing edges and providing the tools and the environment within which we can grow within them. You know, I was working with a client of mine last week, and they've entered a new role that they don't have all the skills to meet, and they were promised that, yeah, come in and do the role. We value your kind of underlying innate skills of compassion and leadership, but we want you to grow into these skills around certain marketing skills, certain skills around sales and strategy. And that's a story that we hear quite often as people are recruited. But as soon as you're in the door and you're into the throes of doing the work and helping the company deliver upon revenue, quite quickly the time that you're afforded to develop your skills disappears. So you're at this position where the challenge that you're set and the skills that you have to meet that challenge are misaligned. And this is a critical part of the flow theory that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi laid out, that flow happens where there is a balance between the challenge and skills that you have. And when that's not there, when the challenge is too high and your skills are too low, you're in a state of anxiety, high anxiety. And within that state, it's very difficult for you to perform. And the opposite is true as well. When you're in a state of high skill, low challenge, you're in a state of boredom. Now, I think the corporate environment has a responsibility to identify this dynamic in each of the people that work in their business and be able to then provide the time and the tools for them to grow and develop as individuals. And in doing so, reap all the rewards that happen when you are in a balanced state between challenge and skill as an individual. because it's in that state that flow emerges, and we know that within flow we become incredibly productive, incredibly creative, and incredibly motivated to do the work that we're being asked to do. And I think that for me is what the future of work has to look like. I suppose in summary, it's we have to find good balance between the extrinsic and intrinsic motivators that we hold dear, that we anchor our lives on. And we have to find ways in which the leaders of industry can recognize their responsibility as incubators of human development, and that in doing so, that they will reap the rewards of productivity and creativity, which are becoming critical in that search for growth. And there's a leap of faith required in getting there. And it's going to be necessitated by generational change. You know, as I said, turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving, you know, like people, the fat cats at the top of the organization don't necessarily want to upset the apple cart and say, actually, there's something more important than meeting stockholder value. But if we can work with young professionals, people like yourselves, people entering leadership and management, and give them an understanding of this philosophy and give them the tools through which they can help people develop an appreciation of intrinsic motivation, I think with that, we can alleviate a lot of the stress and anxiety that happens in the corporate world. And I think we can actually then use industry to start to address some of the larger problems that we as a race are facing now. I mean, there's many existential problems that as individuals or small groups we won't solve, and we need the help of large corporate organizations to do it. And I think that in order to get there, we need to start to think differently about how we support the individuals in each of these organizations to truly become, or to truly realize their individual potential, such that we can realize our human potential collectively. So Gary, that's a lot of words from me. So I might hit pause and let you intro Chuck, and then we can maybe do questions if you want. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Wow, I don't know where to start. That was terrific. Thank you. Can we, I think, give everybody here a sense of your career timeline? Give us a couple of facts along the way, just so that people can see where you were and how, from any external standard, how successful you were, where you were before you decided that path was not the right path for your soul, I guess. When you were in Hungary, what was your position?
Sorry, Gary.
You were with Oracle at that point, is that right?
Sorry, Gary, it's really difficult to hear you. Could you say that again?
I'm sorry. What was your question, Stephen?
It's really difficult to hear you. Sorry.
Okay, just a second. I'm going to try something else here.
That's better. That's better.
We'll try it this way. How much of what I said did you hear? None of it. All right.
Not much.
No. It wasn't that good. So let me make it better this time. So just you mentioned a couple of facts about your kind of employment history over the last couple of decades, but I want to give the class an opportunity to appreciate how far you had really ascended by any external standard, and why, where you were along that path when you decided that this just isn't adding up, this isn't working for you, this isn't, satisfying your soul, and you needed to do something different. So when you were in Eastern Europe, you were in Budapest for how many years? Is that about 10?
Yes, I was in Budapest so I left Scotland about 16 years ago.
Okay.
And I worked in Budapest in Hungary for 4 years. I was working for a large American subcontract manufacturer called Sanmina at that time, and they built computers, so desktops, laptops, and servers for Hewlett-Packard and IBM. And I ran all of technology and the project management office over there for the largest manufacturing plant in Eastern Europe.
Okay.
So that was actually quite fulfilling as a role or as a stage in life, because there was balance between work, and then the experience of kind of moving to a new country, like learning new things outside of the work environment. And I suppose I was fortunate that on those expat contracts, kind of like you don't have to worry too much about money. You're kind of looked after. So I was in that, from that regard, able to look at the other elements of life which provide fulfillment and provide enjoyment. From there, I worked in Guadalajara in Mexico. I worked in Alabama for a little while, and I worked in Singapore with the same company, doing much the same thing, kind of progressively on leaving Hungary and having been recognized as someone that can go into a kind of a foreign country or an environment where we were trying to develop the local talent, someone that could go in and fulfill that role. So I was kind of increasingly, as I moved to Mexico and Alabama and then to Singapore, providing increasingly more senior roles through which I was doing that. And really without any kind of formal development or education relative to the skill of leadership. But at that point, I started to get on or kind of the heroine of seniority and prestige was kind of in the vein at that point. You know, as you start to get these experiences of more senior roles and the adulation that comes with it, you become a little bit addicted, or certainly I became a little bit addicted to finding, well, what was the next one? And often the work that I was doing was not as it was when I was in Hungary, to be of service to the Hungarian organization, to the Hungarians that were trying to develop their skill in the business and grow themselves, but much more to, well, how do I find my next promotion, my next move to another exciting and interesting country? And that change in motivation changes the way in which you act within the business. It changes the way in which you serve. It changes the way in which you think about your value as part of that machine. And it doesn't change it for the better, it changes it for the worse.
Okay, I could give a story or two, and Chuck is nodding there. So I think what I'm going to do here is, rather than ask the class for questions, hold on to your questions. We'll get back to those. I'd like to give Chuck an opportunity to comment on that if he'd like, and then I guess do that first, Chuck, and then we'll introduce you and we'll chat with you for a few minutes.
Okay, yeah, and I've got about 20 minutes here, so
Okay.
I won't take all that time at any means. Well, this can kind of serve as an introduction, just to give the quick answers like Stephen did to those questions.
Sure.
I was trained as a lawyer, and I hated law school and I hated practicing law, but I started to work with businesses and it seemed like they were having more fun. So I decided I would go out and join a business, which I did, which was Amana Refrigeration. And that started off to be a nice job. And very quickly, it became apparent to me that I would not stay as a lawyer, but I would get involved in the business. And that started with me taking responsibility for strategic planning. And then I became responsible for operations. And I should give you some timing. I practiced law for 4 years, from the time I was 26 until I was 30. Went to Amana at 30. I became the head of strategic planning at like 32, and I became the president at 35. And that's not because of some great ability on my part, it's because of battlefield promotions. The owners of Amana were pretty vicious, and the older senior executives did not want to deal with that viciousness. But I was young and thought I could change minds. And so I went in, and I went into one suicide mission after another. That's what the other older people around me would say. You know, we argued against our sister company building a plant. They did build a plant. It was losing $3 million a month. So I was asked to go in and fix that. I did that, and then I was asked to combine these 5 companies that hated each other. They'd been competitors for decades. And as I started that, nobody wanted to do it. So I was completely stumped, and I reached out to somebody for help, and they suggested I read a new book at the time by Peter Senge called The Fifth Discipline, Creating the Learning Organization. And about the same time, a book by Margaret Wheatley came out called Leadership in the New Science. And I thought, wow, there's a whole different game to be played here than the authoritarian, paternalistic, top-down, fear-based, command and control corporate culture. So I decided to try to help create learning organizations. And as I would explain that to my bosses, as sales were rising and profits were rising, they would clap. And then they would ask me to do something extraordinarily stupid. And I would decline, and I would get fired, usually in the evening. And in the morning, they would call and say, oh, we're just a little hot-headed. You know, we didn't really mean to fire you, just come back. So after 6 times of being fired, I finally told our sons. I had obviously told my wife ahead of that, but finally after 6 times, I told my sons, and I said, these very nasty men will probably fire me. You'll read in the paper that I resigned to pursue other interests, or I wanted to spend more time with my family, but it's because these crazy guys fired me. And when they did, on my 40th birthday, as I say, my future was freed up for me. I did some consulting for a while and just quickly realized that you could look like a short-term genius being a consultant, but it was not that much fun for me because I was used to being in the actual fray of making things happen. And then I went to a startup company that was working in early reading. That major investor was the local media company and then we sold the reading company. And for 20 years, I was the CEO of the Gazette Company in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with the newspaper and the television station. And in 2008, we had the 4th worst public disaster in US history, a raging flood that destroyed 10 square miles. And we were trying to figure out as a company how to be more helpful to the community in doing that work. We decided to focus on education. And as we focused on education, we learned, and I'll just give you the short version here, we learned that our high schools were training students in the exact opposite of the attitudes that were generally agreed to be success-inducing. We had the community work on that. So 2 other educators and I decided we were going to try to create a school that actually worked. And we started something called IowaBIG, which I think you have studied in your past classes. So when my board would ask me, why do I get so worked up about organizational development? And as Stephen was saying, to actually work on the development of others so that everyone in the organization can grow and develop, I would say it's because I've been here long enough to see people who've been here 30 years who are literally stunted in their growth. Because the unwritten contract was, we have a money-making machine. If you repress your authentic self and come and join us, we will take care of you materially. I came to the strong conclusion that that's a bad existential bargain. So that's why I got so worked up about organizational development. So I think that's enough for now. So some questions.
Thank you, Chuck. That was terrific. Stephen, do you want to comment, and or I can open it up for the class. I don't know how much of that of Chuck's story, of Chuck's bio you've heard in the past. I think you've heard a few of those snippets from that, but not that that full narrative.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for sharing, Chuck. And yeah, I mean, I love how elegantly you put that at the end. The balance between the need for growth and the need for growth of the top line versus the need for growth of humans is such a peculiar thing to try and hold in mind. You know, that we've become so biased towards revenue and growth to the detriment of each other. When I look at it here, like kind of up on the mountain, once I've made the journey, it feels astonishing that we chose that we made all the choices we made to get to this point, and neglected each other so much in favor of dollars. You know, it's I find it to be quite a sad indictment of how we've grown societally in the last 20 years.
Right. I don't know if
Gary.
Thanks, Stephen. I don't know if my wireless is working here, so we'll see what happens. So I want the class to know that, you know, by this point in my life, I have met a lot of very, very bright people, highly intelligent people, lots of them. And joining us here on this Zoom call are a couple of them that are at that pinnacle. So I don't know if you guys, I want you to appreciate how important it is that the two of them, Stephen and Chuck, were willing to take a few moments and share some of their experiences and probably more important, their wisdom with us. So a couple questions from you guys for either Stephen or Chuck or both of them. Can be about flow, can be about intrinsic motivation, can be about organizational development, can be about, you know, personal development. It can be about a phrase that I've heard Chuck use in the past. He didn't use it this time, but to refer to media organizations as misery-making machines, which is not only beautiful because it's so alliterative, it really cuts to the chase. A lot of organizations are misery-making machines. So lots of things. So I think Hannah here has a question or a comment. I'm going to see if this microphone works. If not, I'm going to come up here and talk.
Can you hear me?
You guys hear?
It's a bit muffled. It's not great.
It's muffled. Okay, sorry. Okay, you can just go up there and speak to the laptop, as I so definitely demonstrated.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Hannah. My question is for both of you. I'll try to phrase this best way I can. I'm currently stepping into a leadership role where I work.
No one's around you, so if you want to pull it, your mask down.
Okay. So my question is, as someone who's stepping into a leadership position in a workplace where they've been for a while and it feels pretty mundane, and the people above me are kind of the way that you're describing, that just like not there to motivate or build off my own strengths, what would you say you would offer advice for someone who's stepping into that position on how to support and motivate employees under me to help like build off their strengths and also encourage increasing skill in places where they're not as strong, and then also just maybe advice on how to motivate myself in that way, since I don't receive that support from the people above me. And I'm going to sit down now.
Thank you, Hannah.
Go ahead, Stephen. I want to hear your answer.
So, great question. And under normal circumstances, Hannah, I'd have a bunch of questions for you to be able to give you a tuned piece of advice. But I think at the root of it, it's about understanding the people that are working in your team better and understanding yourself better. You know, one of the things that I observe is so few people actually understand who they are as individuals and have taken the time to understand what they like, what they don't like, and what their strengths are. And when we don't understand those things, there's no way for us to find alignment between who we are authentically and the work that we want to do. And much less, you as a leader have no data points to be able to help people move towards fulfillment in their work, because you can't align strength if you don't know what they are with the work that's to be done. So becoming familiar with the people that are in your charge, I think, is really important, and similarly becoming more familiar with yourself at a level beyond the kind of I suppose I'm making some broad assumptions, but the kind of general shallow level of self-awareness that we have about our own lives. So I think that's important. And then what I would also say is, as a leader, we often feel guilty. And certainly this was true in my experience, and it's true of many of the leaders that I have led. We feel guilty for asking people to do things which may be challenging or difficult for them. And I think our responsibility is to put people in challenging or difficult situations and wrap the support around them, such that those challenging and difficult situations provide the vehicle for growth. And it's the combination of the awareness of putting someone in a challenging situation and knowing that it's going to induce anxiety and stress, but being adept at identifying and holding that and encouraging them through that stress towards development, which creates growth, and it creates good leaders. So that would be kind of like the highlights of how I'd be approaching the problem, or actually it's an opportunity. It's how I'd be approaching the opportunity. Sorry.
Thank you. I agree with everything Stephen said. I would just add that that what you're describing is very similar to one of my first managerial assignments. And one of my biggest problems was what I learned in school is that there is a right answer, and the person that gets it fastest is best. So I thought that I had to have the answer. And it's the team that has to have the answer. And if you actually just, if you have to be relaxed. Whatever it takes for you to be relaxed, you know, and so because that will spill over into the team if you're relaxed. And if you can do that, have that physiological safety and actually listen to the team, you'll be amazed what collaborative wisdom will emerge. That would be my shorthand.
I think that's great wisdom, Chuck. And Hannah, I would also like challenge you to get in touch with what the reason is that you want to be a leader, or you find yourself in this position where you're going to become a leader, and decide what kind of leader you want to be. You know, there's a philosophical undercurrent that we have to resolve within ourselves about how we want to lead and what's important to us about leadership. And to Chuck's point, we need to familiarize ourselves with what that is so that we can express that, so it comes through in everything that we are, and be able to talk about it and live it. And I think that's important. If you've not done, we don't know how, or I don't know how you've arrived at this opportunity, but yeah, I think it's good to have some self-reflection about what it means to you and what you want to be going forwards as a leader. But congratulations as well.
Congratulations on the promotion. Now you have a hint of what's in store for you, right? So maybe not. It's up to you. You know, I guess it's you have the sense of agency, and you don't. That doesn't have to be the way it works out. Other questions? We have lots of really good. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. So Ty has a question for you guys.
So in the work environment, how do you go to constantly be going for growth and not like positions and money? Like what is kind of the mindset going through life, like working towards growing yourself instead of working towards making more money? Let's take a step back.
Well, I can go first this time. Working to make more money can help you to grow yourself, right? It's not an either or, but it's the question of balance. And what I've observed in too many environments is there's not a balance. It's either we're going to completely repress people so that we can maximize unbelievably short shareholder return, like in the next 90 days. Or we're going to let 1,000 flowers bloom and everybody's going to have an opinion and we're going to have a great diversity of thought. We're going to co-create everything and literally nothing gets done. So neither one of those are great growth environments. So it is that interweaving of the dance that actually allows you to do both.
Agreed, Chuck. I echo that. I would also say that the extrinsic motivator of money is not quite the whole story, because it's not the money necessarily that motivates us, it's what we use the money for. And kind of materialism, consumerism, having more stuff is a short-lived way to achieve the aspiration of fulfillment and happiness. Once you've got the new car or the new iPhone or the new whatever, the new house, the shine wears off incredibly quickly, and it's replaced by this need to have the next new thing, and you find yourself in this continual cycle of acquisition and then need for more, and then that cascades into a need to get more money, and that invariably means moving company or getting promotions, and all of these things take us away, in my opinion, from the development towards mastery and to fulfillment at a human level, to get fulfillment of our actual self-actualization, to use Maslow's terms. And I'm not naive enough to think that we don't have to have money, and we don't have to have things in our life. We do. But from personal experience, when I left Adobe, when I chose to walk away from the corporate environment, I was in a very lucrative position, both in terms of my salary and the equity that I was provided. And I had to make a conscious decision that letting go of that income is going to make a material change in how I live my life. And one of the first things I did was worked out, what is the number that I need to get? What is to live a comfortable life? So like a simple life where I'm comfortable for myself and for my daughter. What is the number that I have to have? Not for buying things that I don't need, not to fulfill kind of a consumer mindset, but what is that number? And I work towards that, because we do still need to have safety and security. So I was effectively working out, what is my baseline of Maslow's pyramid, and what's the number that I need to derive that? And then everything else is good fortune above that. And the only other thing I would say on that is just to re-emphasize that the work environment, for me, is the best vehicle that we have for personal growth. And I'm not sitting here I'm not here to say that everyone should stop working. I think everyone should be working and seeing work for what it is, not as a route to dollar, but as a route to fulfillment through growth. And I think that environment is necessary for us to achieve that.
Chuck, did you want to add anything?
No, just it was a thumbs up.
Oh,
saying,
okay. All
yes,
right, great.
yes.
So both of you, I don't know, Chuck, in your situation, it might have been more of a function of, being ready to retire. But I guess you did make it happen for yourself earlier. What am I talking about? Well, both of you got out of the Faustian bargain that you had made with your workplace. And can you talk about how that felt once you realized that, okay, this is enough of this, I'm going to do things differently? And Chuck, I think your situation was within the organization and trying to change the organization from within rather than continuing to live out the existential bargain that you were
Right.
sort of ensnared in for a long time.
Right, and I'll go ahead, Stephen, again and go first. For some reason, I had this meeting ending in 1 minute and I need to,
Oh, okay, talk fast.
and I need to go to another meeting.
Okay.
But how it felt was wonderful.
Okay.
Felt centered and grounded and hopeful. Yeah.
For me, I carry quite a weight of responsibility with the choice that I made, because on one hand, I made it because I was on the verge of not a very pleasant mental state, but I left because I wanted to fix myself, but I also saw there was an opportunity to fix a whole lot of other people. So like one of the things we've not touched a lot on is kind of the power and the value of passion and working towards something bigger than yourself. And the experience that I had in the corporate world, the greatest value that it gave me was to show me the bad side of it, and to give me the motivation to try and go and do something about that for the betterment of huge numbers of people who are entrapped, ensnared by kind of the extrinsic motivators and the corporate machine. And it's scary. Like the size of the problem that I've made it my purpose to try and solve is bigger than I can hold in my mind at any one point in time. And the time it will take to solve it is I mean, decades long. And that on some days is wearing, but on other days it's entirely motivating. And it's a really exciting proposition to be able to think that I could help people not have the experience of work that I had, but have a really positive experience. And in doing that, by providing a positive work experience, provide a positive experience in the entirety of their life. Because Gary touched upon right at the very start the stat that only 13% of people are engaged at work. That's a really frightening statistic. But the more frightening statistics are the level of disengagement that we see. And people take that home into their home lives, into their family lives, and it's really destructive. And it's hard to go and fix that problem, but I think one contribution we can make is by fixing the professional environment, because we will see a significant and amplified improvement in the whole of life by being able to make people more fulfilled by the work they do and enjoy this kind of necessary evil of work that we have in society at the moment.
First of all, Stephen, thank you so much. It's great to see you again. And Gary and the whole class, thank you. I really do have to go.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Bye-bye.
All right, and you probably need to get on with your day, Stephen, right? It's what, 11:30 there?
It is. It's 10:30.
A little later. Yeah.
If there's more questions, I can hang for another 10 or so.
Okay. All right. Well,
if you want to cut out, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Great. Really appreciate that. Well, I'm sure these guys want to get on with their night as well. There might even be snow in our forecast. So.
Wow. Okay.
But then I don't feel too bad because it'll be gone in no time and it's going to be warm next week. And you're just heading into winter.
Yeah.
Sorry. You knew it anyway, but I didn't have to grind my heel into it or into you. More questions or comments for Stephen? I know our audio here is not ideal, so we had, at least maybe it's me. I'm told I need to have my hearing checked. Questions or comments for Stephen? I have one question and then we can let everybody go. And you may have already answered this, but I'll just phrase it as a question directly. Over your professional life, what's the one biggest lesson that you have learned? Can you bring it down to that? And if you can't, you can give us 2 lessons. That's okay.
Wow, it's a big question.
Sorry, you didn't know this was coming.
I would say, like, I think Hannah's question was a great question, and I kind of spoke about it there. But know who you are.
Okay.
Get really familiar with what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and then pursue that. Because if you don't, at some point in the future, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 20 years down the line, you're going to have to pivot, because there's only so long we can suffer for extrinsic reward until we realize that actually this is not aligned with who I authentically am, and you're going to have to do that work at some point. The faster you can get really comfortable with your authentic self, and specifically what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, the quicker you can get moving on aligning that with how you want to serve the world and how you want to show up for other people and for yourself. That would be it, Gary.
Oh, that's great, because getting that round peg disengaged from that square hole that it's been locked into can be a tough thing to do. So great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very much so. Thank you so much. I'll send you the recording of this.
Please.
You can do with it what you like. Okay. Anyone else? Stephen, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. We'll talk
Thank you.
soon. Okay. I know you wanted to follow up on some things. Okay. Thank you.
Have a
Okay,
good
bye-bye.
evening.
Thank you.